The United States is currently at war with Iran. That still sounds strange to say, doesn't it? It's a sentence that will go down in history books. But right at this critical juncture, we need to ask some questions. Who is this war being fought for? Whose interests does it serve? And are you aware of the game being played behind the scenes in Washington while American soldiers are losing their lives? Because what's happening behind the scenes is far more complex and far more disturbing than what's on the stage. On one hand, there's an administration that says, we're against the Iranian regime. On the other, there are concrete reports that the same administration has quietly dropped decades-old sanctions cases against Iran, eased oil sanctions on Russia, and that the father-in-law and son-in-law continue to expand their business interests in the Middle East. All of this needs to be explained in detail. But first, pause for a moment and think, would a country really do so many favors for an enemy it is at war with? In recent days, multiple news outlets reported that Russia is providing intelligence support to Iran, enabling Iran to strike American targets more effectively. A U.S. official confirmed this situation in the clearest possible terms. In other words, Russia is currently passing on information that could actually harm American soldiers to the enemy side. This is a scandal in and of itself. But what was the Trump administration's response? The Trump administration temporarily lifted oil sanctions against Russia under the pretext of reining in energy prices that had skyrocketed due to the Iran conflict. So, while Russia is helping Iran target Americans on one hand, on the other hand, Trump gifted this country an exemption from sanctions. How do you explain this logic? You could call it a policy mistake or view it as a strategic miscalculation. But if there is a pattern here, it becomes difficult to dismiss it as a mere coincidence that keeps repeating itself. Europe reacted strongly to this decision. German Chancellor Merz explicitly stated that he found the sanctions exemption misguided, noting that the issue with oil prices is not one of supply but of price. French President Macron also emphasized that the stance toward Russia must not change. Democratic Senator Chris Coons, meanwhile, said, the clearest winner of this war is Russia. The Wall Street Journal also reported that Putin is watching these developments with pleasure. European allies are in a state of shock. The sanctions policy against Russia, built up over years, is being torn to shreds by Trump's unilateral decision. And he is doing this while the war with Iran is ongoing. Does this question cross your mind? Did Trump start this war against Iran or to create space for Russia? We must continue to seek the answer to this question, because the picture isn't limited to Russian oil. There is a man named Alexander Smirnov. This FBI informant provided the FBI with completely fabricated information claiming that the Biden family had been bribed by the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. This lie became the cornerstone of the Republicans' effort to remove Biden from office. Smirnov later admitted in his confession that he had obtained the information in question from officials linked to Russian intelligence. As a result, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. So far, the law has taken its course, but what comes next? On March 4, in a move that received almost no public attention, Trump's Department of Justice filed an unusual petition seeking to overturn Smirnov's conviction and have the charges dropped. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche personally signed this petition. Historically, it is extremely rare for Deputy Attorneys General to intervene so directly in such cases. Legal experts said this step could be an early sign that the administration is preparing a pardon for Smirnov. After all, the DOJ actively fighting to have someone released during the appeals process is almost unprecedented, and it's worth noting all these efforts coincided with the period when Russia was passing intelligence to Iran to kill Americans. Now let's look at the Iranian side. According to Trump's rhetoric, the justification for the war is to punish the Iranian regime. So what happened during those same days? Trump's Department of Justice dropped the case against the People's Bank of Iran for violating sanctions. This was the largest ever case of Iranian sanctions violations in history and involved billions of dollars in illicit money transfers. On one hand, bombs are raining down on Iran. On the other, a bank allegedly responsible for transferring billions of dollars to Iran is being spared. How can these two things coexist? You don't need a degree in law or political science to conclude he isn't doing this for the reason he claims. In February 2026, Trump appointed his son-in-law Kushner as an unofficial peace envoy. In this role, Kushner represents the U.S. in negotiation processes across the Middle East. However, around the same time, the New York Times reported that Kushner was attempting to raise $5 billion or more from Middle Eastern governments for his private investment firm, Affinity Partners. In other words, the man currently steering U.S. Middle East policy is simultaneously raising funds from the very countries that are the targets of that policy. Saudi Arabia had invested $2 billion in Kushner's company in 2022. Reports at the time revealed that the Public Investment Fund's PIF own evaluation committee had opposed this investment, but Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had overruled the committee's recommendation. Now, it is reported that bin Salman frequently holds phone calls with Trump and is pressuring him to Iran harder. In other words, Saudi Arabia is encouraging this war against rival Iran both financially and politically. And Kushner is asking for more money from this country. Senator Elizabeth Warren commented on these developments. While U.S. soldiers are losing their lives in a war in the Middle East, Trump's peace envoy is raising money for a private investment firm. Iran's Foreign Minister Arakshi, meanwhile, stated, "Those giving the U.S. president bad advice are complicit in this bloodshed. A fair agreement was possible." Is this a government or something else entirely where interests clearly clash and accountability has become the norm? Asking this is not about conjuring up conspiracy theories. It's about piecing together the evidence that has emerged. A country is simultaneously easing sanctions on Russia while waging war against Iran, which uses Russian intelligence. The Department of Justice is attempting to release prisoners linked to Russian intelligence. It is reported that the Sun, in law, is raising billions of dollars from the same countries while touring the Middle East on a diplomatic mission. And the largest ever Iran sanctions case in history is being dismissed. If you examine these one by one, you might find an explanation. But when you see them all together, you can't help but ask yourself, whose government are they really running?